Good day and welcome to another interesting episode of Logistics with Purpose. My name is Enrique Alvarez and my co-host Kristi Porter is here with me as usual. Kristi, how are you doing today?
I'm good. It is a nice sunny day here in New Jersey, a little chilly, but always good and feels more like spring when the sun is out. So I'm glad to be here. I'm glad to be in this conversation again. And yeah, we just get to talk to such interesting people. And especially it's so fun that we're getting to talk to our guests today only after emails and things. So this is a much better way to have a conversation. So today we'd love to welcome Izzie Ali. He is the Director of Operations at Coyuchi. So Izzie, welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Happy to
Well,
be
we're
here.
delighted. We
Pleasure,
can't wait.
pleasure that you're here today. Thanks for
Yeah.
joining.
Of
And we
course.
want to hear more about you, more about the company. But before we do so, let's warm up with a couple of quick questions. So I'll ask you, and then you just respond with the first thing that comes to your mind.
Sounds good.
So what motivates you daily?
Yeah, I would say, I think I'm a true operator at heart. So for me, it's, waking up to get something achieved, whether it be how big or small. It's just, kind of crossing things off the list.
Okay, well, that leads me right into my next one. What's a productivity hack you can share with us?
Yeah, this is something that I learned during the COVID days. So, I think everyone got the meeting fatigue typically. So blocking off your calendar.
Mm,
I think finding times where you can block off your calendar to whether it's, a 30-minute just to get up out of your seat, get some fresh air, walk around, do something to kind of decompress and get yourself in a refreshed state before you attack the rest of your day.
perfect. Favorite book?
Ooh, that's a good one. I would say Stillness Speaks by Eckhart Tolle.
Oh,
That's I think it kind of resonates in the sense that, you know, for all of us here that are in ops, supply chain, it's always a go, go, go mentality, trying to get things done. And sometimes your best work and your best decisions happen when you're sitting still and just kind of reflecting, right? So I think and that could be applied to all aspects of life, but yeah, I think that's sort of something that, resonated with me when I first read that book.
I love that. Favorite place to be?
The mountains. So I grew up in Sacramento, so which is in Northern California. So you're 2 hours east from the mountains, 2 hours west to the nearest beach and ocean. And so I think, it's something about just being in the mountains, fresh air, again, this concept of stillness, right? Just being one
Mhm.
with nature, really helps you kind of reset and refresh.
Absolutely. And I'm excited to dig more into that because, yes, you were doing evidently a really good job of balancing the go, go, go mentality of supply chain with getting out and being still. And I love that. What's a quote that inspires you?
I would say it would have to be Muhammad Ali. It's don't count the days, but make the days count. So
Mm.
again, kind of that operator mentality of just finding the small wins, just making sure each and every day you find something that you can celebrate almost.
Mhm.
Well, easy.
Awesome.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for your answers. And you're right, like stillness, being mindful, it's very important, especially in our industry, as we'll find out soon. But before we get into everything that you do on a day-to-day basis now, tell us a little more who Izzy is. How was your childhood? A little bit more about you, your background, maybe some stories that you remember and kind of shaped you the way you are now.
Yeah. I don't know. Do we have enough time for that? No, I'm just kidding.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so I was actually born in Canada in a town called Edmonton. Was still an infant when my parents decided to move from there and move into the US. So they, dropped roots in California and Sacramento. And I have an older sibling and an older brother actually. And we had, I would say, their typical childhood. We played outside. We were both very sports oriented, so we played a lot of sports for the sports teams and for school teams and things like that. Um, both of our parents worked, so it was really important from a family dynamic perspective that the evenings always mattered, right? So, we always came together after everyone's home from work and school and we're done playing, to have that, family aspect still. I always joke because I have two kids of my own now, and my 5-year-old, soon to be 5-year-old next week, is already thinking about a cell phone, and I'm like, well, hold on.
Wow.
Well, growing up, it's like we didn't have that technology. So it's
Right.
like, you're playing outside until the sun goes down. And if the sun goes down, it's time to come inside, you know? And so that's the type of childhood I really had, you know? I think things that kind of sh from that childhood, what shaped me into who I am today, I would say a lot would have to be attributed to how my dad raised us. I think, you know, this concept of a hard work ethic, be purposeful, be intentional in what you do. So a little background there is, you know, when my parents moved into California in the early 90s, my dad had a really brilliant idea of starting to invest in real estate at that time. And, you know, a part of that was he was the man of all trades. He was a landlord, he was an investor, he was a maintenance guy, he was, you know, the guy that rehabbed things. And of course, having two sons, your summer breaks, your spring breaks, you're
Right.
painting a house, you're, fixing this, you're
It's
doing
free
that.
labor.
Hmm.
Exactly, right? But I think, that those moments where we learned how to paint a house, how to change a faucet or things like that at a young age really shaped this hard work ethic that I carry on to my professional career and even pass down to my kids today.
Wow.
Hmm.
No, and that makes perfect sense. It sounds like your dad was a real entrepreneur of all sorts.
He was, yeah. I think, one thing like one story that still resonates with me, right? I think I was about 12 or 13 years old, it was summer break, my friends are going to like Disneyland, summer camp, things like that. My dad's like, hey, all right, we have 2 weeks to rehab these two homes, and we can turn around for renters. And he tasked me to paint a room. First time ever painting. He gives me the roller, the paint tray, pour some paint in there. He's like, okay, when you're done, come tell me. So as a 13-year-old, you're kind of like, I don't want to be here. It's summer.
Right.
Why am I doing this, right? So you find ways of like, oh, I'm just going to paint this really fast, kind of carelessly, so to speak, and then tell them I'm done so I can like leave. Come to find out, when you do something carelessly and try to think you're good at it when you're not, you make mistakes, right? So what do? I paint so fast that I get some paint on the ceiling. There's streaks. There's, not even coats. And then it comes back, my dad comes back and says, you didn't do this right. Let the paint dry and redo the whole thing all over again, right?
Wow.
Uh,
Yeah.
and you're kind of like, crap, like I thought I was going to get out of this. And so that was like that light bulb moment for me to be like, oh, if I would have just not try to look for shortcuts and did this a little bit more intentionally the first time, I wouldn't have to do it the second time. So I
Hmm.
think that was the lesson learned in that to where, as I mentioned, it kind of carried on into my work ethic and how I, kind of just developed my career.
That is
Yeah.
funny that you mentioned Izzy because I can relate to that. My dad probably would have been good friends with yours because he always said that, I'll say it in Spanish then translate it, but he said, El flojo trabaja doble, which basically just means that the lazy people work double. And
Mm.
which is
That's
the same
that's
thing,
a
right?
that's a
If
fair
you,
point. Yeah.
so it's funny. So tell me, what sport were you guys playing when you were growing up? Your
Yeah,
hockey?
no, no. So both my brother and I are tall. We're like 6 foot and up. So we had our growth spurts obviously a little bit earlier than others. So basketball was our biggest thing. We both played basketball, both for middle school, high school. So basketball, I played a little bit of football in high school, and then soccer was always a big thing for me too.
Oh, awesome. Sounds like you yeah, you're also credit to your dad for getting into the real estate business in Northern California before it really took off as well. So have you I think we all kind of have those moments too where you say something and you're like, I just became my parent. And
Yeah.
so I'm curious if any of these lessons have already come up in life with your kids that you've said, oh, yep, I'm passing this one down. I didn't mean to, but here we go.
Yeah, honestly, it has. I think with my kids, I like to instill that same kind of work ethic, even at a young age, right? So it's something simple as, all right, if you're done playing with your toys, put them away, right? And so my 5-year-old, or soon to be 5-year-old, he's learning. He's a quick learner, so he knows that it's not like go stuff the Legos underneath the couch. It's like, hey, I actually need to put it back in the container and put it back in the other room. Because yeah, it's double work, right? Because I'm gonna
Yeah.
find those Legos, and then you're gonna have to like, I'm gonna wake you up out of bed to come get them, if I need to.
Cute. Yeah, and I bet he's the one reminding you that he is almost 5.
Yeah, he is. Yeah, yeah. His birthday's next week, so plenty of stuff ahead.
Awesome.
Easy, what's your dad's name again?
His name is Israr.
That's rare. Well, I'm sure that he's passing on a lot of really good teachings for you, and then I'm hopefully you're going to pass them those to your kids. Changing gears a little bit, you earned your bachelor's in business administration with a focus on supply chain from Brandman University, and then you went on to complete not one but two MBAs, one from the University of Manchester, another from Indiana University's Kelley School of Business. So, what tell us a little bit more about your career and about what was it that kind of brought you closer to supply chain and that caught your interest?
Yeah, so I think to start, right out of high school, wasn't quite sure what I was going to do in terms of like traditional 4-year college or like really a career choice at that time. So I kind of, with most kids or most teenagers at that time, would take like a break, and my ended up being me just sort of aimlessly working different jobs, trying to figure out, what I like, what I don't like. And I just so happened to end up getting a job as a warehouse worker at a small 3PL startup. It was a husband and wife that started the company called Total Service Logistics at that time. And started working there, and was kind of good at what I was doing in terms of just general warehouse operations. And I quickly, within the first 2 years, moved up into an operations management role. And I remember one of the biggest clients they had there was a solar company, and their logistics manager who oversaw us, and they were our clients, and he oversaw our account. I just happened to, call him. We were talking, and then, he was asking me, he's like, "So what are you going to do with your education?" And I'm like, kind of took me aback, and I'm like, "Well, I'm going to school. I'm thinking of doing finance. I did some finance credits and things like that." And he was like, "Why don't you look at supply chain?" I was like, "Okay." He was like, "You're good at what you do." He was like, "There's degrees in logistics, operations, and things like that." But he was like, "If you focus on supply chain, you won't go wrong. It's broad enough." And so just so happened when I was at Brandman getting my undergrad in finance, I found out they had a supply chain degree as well. And I made that pivot. And it's been paying off ever since. I think I don't regret it one bit.
Wow, that's well, and you have actually been in supply chain for a while. You actually know a lot about supply chain and logistics. So for everyone out there that's listening to us that actually is studying supply chain or is willing to actually move into supply chain, what would be like the top two things that you would tell people to bring them to our industry?
I think, the two things would be is there's never a dull day, So if you want a job,
It really is.
if you want a job that's not monotonous, not boring, something that keeps you excited, keeps you sort of in that what I keep referencing, this operator mentality, supply chain is the industry to be in. You're always going to have something to learn, something to experience, and something to gain every single time. Um, the second thing would be is just, as from a pragmatic view, I think, parents tend to motivate their children to go into professions, right? Whether it be
Right.
doctors, lawyers, things like that. But supply chain is an industry that I think is not as I would say exposed out there in society, because a lot of us don't consider what supply chain is.
Right.
We don't think about, hey, I went to Starbucks to get this coffee, but how did that coffee even get there, right? Like, what is Starbucks' supply chain to supply that to you this morning? And so I think, it's just such a vast industry that can apply to just about everything. That, there's unlimited potential to build a career in it.
That's
Absolutely.
absolutely true. Yeah, it is. The fairies don't deliver it, people. It finds its way to you in some other way. So
Exactly.
yes, that is absolutely true and touches every product. So yeah, I feel like if you work in that, it's kind of one of those, like what did they say, teachers and nurses, you'll always have a job, supply chain, the exact same way. Well, let's talk about your current role, leading operations at Coyuchi. So first, we've already asked you, you said you get asked all the time, so let's just talk about the name and where the name comes from, and then tell us a little bit more about the overview and origin story of the company.
Yeah, so Koyuchi, it derives from an ancient Aztec language. So it's It's the name for the original color of cotton. So cotton itself as a crop is typically brown. So that's a staple color way that we have in all of our products called Koichi cotton. So that's where the name derives from. Definitely not a Japanese influence. I can tell you that. So yeah, and so Koyuchi, company was founded in 1991 and it's been in business ever since. We've done, we're in the industry to really, I would say, carve out a niche to really showcase the ability to be a luxury brand, but also sustainable at the same time. So all of our products are 100% organic, cotton, latex, and wool. We have all the certifications such as fair trade, goals and GOT certifications that back that. And our teams are, well aligned with that mission. Everyone that works with the company understands, that's the goal of the company. That's where we try to position ourselves in the market. And, the company itself and the employees themselves all have some sort of personal interest in sustainability. Hence why we're so invested in making sure the company succeeds.
Mm.
Well, you mentioned certifications, and there's something that, of course, proves the value that Koyushi brings to the market and kind of the expertise and leadership position that you guys have as one of the luxury brands that is also sustainable, that also cares, that it's purpose driven. And so let's talk a little bit about the fair trade certification, which of course means that your supply chains are directly impacted and you ensure that it's ethically sourced, fair wages for workers, safe working conditions, environmentally sustainable, et cetera, et cetera. How does this certification and in general all the other ones that I know that you hold kind of um, play into day-to-day operations and your work?
Yeah. I think if we think about the supply chain end to end, I would say our production and sourcing team has done a phenomenal job upstream from design to production to ensure that our suppliers are all aligned with these missions, are able to maintain these certifications. We have that traceability down to the crop, type of thing. So that, all kudos go to our team up there. Now the product's produced and now it's, sitting on a vendor factory and overseas and needs to come to the US and we have to get it into consumers' hands. That's where it gets a little tricky, right? I think there's not enough um out there in terms of achieving that same level of sustainability within logistics and operations. So for myself and my team, the way I orient our team to ensure that we try to stay aligned with those missions and values is working with select partners, right? So I think, as we think of our logistics providers, our 3PLs, understanding what their overall goals are as a company from a sustainability perspective, looking at companies that also have a net zero program that they're achieving as an organization to see if that aligns with our goals. If they have renewable energy in their factories or in their warehouses, right? So whether it be solar or wind, what are they doing to also align with that? And then, when you think of freight forwarding, you think of ocean vessels, you think of all that, what can we do operationally to impact that? And so, one thing is, there's, a lot more changes happening in that market where steamship lines and carriers are using biodegradable fuel in their vessels, right? And so it's not widely available just yet, but seeing where we can tap into those type of carriers to really help propel our mission within the greater of the supply chain. Um,
Mhm.
and then lastly, I think I would say, which most retailers and most shippers don't like, obviously we don't like to air freight, but air freight is
Right.
obviously a contributor to your carbon footprint, right? And so what can we do within the stream of our supply chain from a planning perspective, from a production, and then logistics, where we can align to ensure that we are moving goods in the most sustainable way as well.
Mm. Impressive. Um, that I can only imagine building that from the ground up, and it must be so exciting to you are clearly somebody, the way you've already spoken, that embraces challenges, and there are certainly a lot that come in the industry, just a regular company, much less trying to do it the way that Coyuchi is. So I'm curious, what obstacles challenges have you come up across? There are a lot of people, especially, of course, the larger companies, that gets more and more challenging, the greater the scale of your inventory and products and footprint. So, what are some challenges that you've dealt with? It could be anything from sourcing to delivery. And how do you overcome them? How do you measure impact and then continue to make a dent in those challenges?
Yeah, I think, kind of just piggybacking off the earlier topic of, just it's difficult to really achieve that same level of sustainability that we have in place in our production and sourcing side to carry through into distribution, logistics, and transportation. The challenges are really that, it's trying to find carriers that you can work with and partner with to continue that sustainability mission while in a cost-effective manner, right? I think we've seen the shift in the market. We've seen, at least in the small parcel industry, more electrified fleet vehicles, right? So UPS and FedEx doing that adoption of that for your final mile delivery. But really where we make the impact, at least from our side in the operations side is our packaging. I think, we in the past year have been able to convert up to 80% of our corrugate to be post-consumer recycle. So it's 100% recycled materials that we're using. And so that was a big initiative to really hit that purpose that we're trying to achieve. And and without sacrificing integrity of the delivery experience to the customer.
Is there anything that's been particularly eye-opening to you? You may have come into this with not a lot of knowledge or a little knowledge, but still every company presents their own unique set of skill set and learning opportunities. So is there something that has kind of taken you by surprise that you've had to figure out?
Yeah, I think, I wouldn't say surprise, but which was super interesting to me and one of the reasons why I joined Coyuchi was the circular economy, our closed loop supply chain that the company has developed prior to me onboarding with them, was a very intriguing aspect of their supply chain that as I've started and worked with the company and now have ownership of that supply chain has really um, really taught me a lot of things about how circular supply chains can work in a home bed home textile bedding type industry.
Right.
Well, and I believe the program is called Takeback program, right? And you also encourage clients that have Koyushi products to recycle them and bring them back to the store, which, of course, as you were just recently mentioning, it creates a complete new set of challenges when it comes to, well, how does this work? Reverse logistics. How do you actually bring all these products back? Where do you send them? Who's going to be in charge of coordinating? I mean, must be extremely challenging, yet I know that you are very efficient. So tell us a little bit more about this reverse logistics and the initiative to actually allow clients to recycle their loft products.
Yeah, yeah. So that program, I believe, started in 2017 with our retail store. We just had a lot of clients asking, they love the product, they want to buy new stuff, but they don't also being very eco-friendly. They didn't want to just, throw it away in the dumpster, right? So the thought of that came from why don't we create some sort of supply chain or some sort of program where customers can just trade in their old goods because we know they love the product, give them an incentive to trade it in by 15% off on their next purchase. And then we figure out the supply chain from there. And at that time, the company had partnered with a provider called Second Home Renewal, I believe. And they were effectively managing that part of the supply chain. So today we have on our site something called Second Home Renewed, which is all of our pre-loved product that have gone through a rigorous quality inspection refurbishment process to then be listed back on our website to be sold and given a second chance and second life, right? Um, that part of the supply chain really is fed from that the take back program, along with some of our returns that we get from customers and clients. But again, it's really ensuring that if we're making the decision to put this back on the market and making sure that a customer is going to want to buy this, that we do the right thing by making sure that it's fully vetted in quality and refurbished to the utmost capacity to where it's if you put them side by side, you wouldn't
Right.
be able to tell that it was used, right?
Mm.
Uh, so that's it. It does have its set of challenges, but it's an initiative that resonates with the company, resonates with their employees, including myself. It's something that I've bought into quite a bit and have
Right.
really chose to take the lead to make sure that we continue this program.
And I think I read it somewhere that just we have so many things already in the world that stop manufacturing and actually reusing, recycling, or buying old things is really, really good for the environment as well. And you guys are definitely leading the charge when it comes to some of these things. So congratulations.
Thank
Mhm.
you.
And we see very few companies undertaking this challenge right now. Is it
Right.
a field that you think will continue to grow in the retail space?
I believe so. I think, there's definitely a consumer base that is specifically looking at that. If we zoom out for a second away from home textiles, but if you look at used apparel, I think, there's a huge market. There's plenty of providers in that area that are doing very well. And so I think, the conscious consumer that is out there looking to be more sustainable, be more eco-friendly, be more intentional of how they spend their money on making sure that it's impacting the planet, in a positive way. Those consumers are going to continue to purchase things in that way.
For sure. Well, you clearly have an extensive background, everything from supply chain management to warehouses, inventory, sales and operations, procurement, risk mitigation, just across the board. So, for our logistics people listening at home, um, how would you go about as we talked about, the initiatives you've done at Coyuchi are so impressive. Where are a few places that people can start to maybe build a more ethical supply chain, a more sustainable supply chain? What have you learned that others can take away?
Yeah, I think as it relates to the supply chain itself, I think, regardless of industry, it's having that conversation, right? I think opening it up within leadership, opening it up within the organization, I think nothing's too small to make an impact, so if that's something simple as just trying to recycle the office stuff, like, in your kitchen, doing composting, something of that effect, something that small can still have a meaningful change. And it's not something that it's a home run
Mhm.
type of activity. It requires the building blocks to get there, right? Especially if you don't have something in place today. Also, I mean, in the retail industry is definitely more, I would say, visible on how much your sustainability missions are coming across to consumers. And so it's always going to be something that, from a retail perspective, a marketing aspect of being able to showcase your ability to be sustainable and do it the right way. I think carbon offsets are typically a easy way to engage in that and get yourself, in a place where you're starting to build a foundation blocks for sustainability. But it's then, making the investment, making the right decisions, and making the really just the time to find areas of improvement throughout your operations.
And
Are
if
you,
people are not the top of the at the pyramid in the supply chain, like the director of operations, like you are, if they're if they're further down, how should they get people's attention? Which people should they start recruiting to help build the case, to be able to start turning the ship?
Yeah, I think it again starts the conversation with peers. It starts the conversation with your direct superior, right? And just saying, hey, like, is there something that we could look at? If you don't have the influencing decision power to, maybe change the supplier or, you know, ask the in the agency that does the office cleaning to use, biodegradable material, something of that effect, then it's just again something small as, a lot of organizations, depending on the size, but are able to create, social committees, right, within their office, right? So maybe there's a sustainable, cohort or group that, once a month they get together and ideate on things to then present to management and leadership, to now kind of get that step forward in the right direction.
I love that.
absolutely. And I think it's everyone's kind of job at this point, right? And I think it's a very big competitive advantages for companies like yours that actually are that conscious and that kind of worried about the environment and some of the other initiatives that you mentioned. What is the future for you? You're always been, and Koyuchi has always been at the forefront of this type of initiatives. Is there any future plans for Koyuchi that you want to share with us and our audience? What can we expect next?
Well, I'm not going to steal the thunder of our marketing and PR team, so I'm
No,
gonna.
yeah, don't do that because they'll be very mad at you.
Yeah. No, we're definitely always looking forward, right? I think that's the benefit of our business is being pioneers in our industry, especially in the eco luxury space. We're always looking at ways to innovate, looking at ways to grow. What I can mention is early on earlier this year, we launched our first mattress. And so I think, we are poised in the market to kind of disrupt that a bit, to be the 100% organic mattress in the industry, and only more can come from that.
Congratulations. I mean, that sounds like a really exciting milestone for the company and for you and for the logistics team. So switching or changing the question a little bit, so it's not specific to Koyuchi, but in general, where do you see the industry coming? I don't know, 5, 10 years from now, where do you think other retailers will be at?
Yeah, I mean, I think, we've from an industry perspective, we've seen the dramatic shift into e-com, right? I think, we see a lot of brick and mortar stores either having to close their doors or reorient their geographical locations of where it makes sense to keep brick and mortar. But also from a consumer perspective, we've seen the adoption of e-com into brick and mortar, right? So pick up at store or ship to store. And so I think that trend will continue. Um, but I think, more and more as we get into this particular class of customers or type of customers that are again conscious and eco-conscious, I think retailers will eventually have to start adapting to gain that market share of those customers that are looking for those type of products that are better for you, organic, sustainable, and even in that circular economy concept too. I think there's a lot of room for entry and opportunity for retailers to get into that and really poise themselves to be, at some point, someone could be a market leader in a particular vertical. But I think, that's naturally where retail should be heading towards. Um, but obviously, there's a lot of geopolitical factors that can be considered with that as well, right?
For sure. Thank you. Thank you for this has been a great education for us, and it really is kind of fascinating to hear about and learn about the entirety of the supply chain that Koichi has really cultivated that gives back and makes the industry better. So thank you for all the great work that you do. So as we wrap up, I'd just like to ask you, what does the phrase logistics with purpose mean to you?
Yeah, I think this kind of, I led with this in the beginning of our conversation, but logistics with purpose, what it means to me is at whatever you do, be intentional, be mindful, and just be purposeful, right?
Mm.
And whether it's in your professional world, your personal world, in business, I think, following that level of more or less following that mantra, you'll never go wrong.
Right.
Wow.
Thank
Well, thank you so much. And no better way of closing this episode than with those words. So thanks again, Izzie. It's been a pleasure. How can our listeners connect to you? And of course, how can they learn a little bit more about Koyuchi and the amazing things that you guys are doing?
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn, so feel free to look me up on LinkedIn, and I'm sure I'll be tagging myself on this recording here to promote it. Uh, but yeah, with Koichi, you guys can visit our website, www.koichi.com. We're on all social media platforms, and if you are ever happen to vacation in Point Reyes Station, California, which is a tourist attraction, we have a store there for you to pop in. And get a firsthand view and feel of our products.
Fantastic. Does that come with free naps now that you have the mattresses in place?
Absolutely.
I'm making it.
You can test them out,
Yes.
but
Okay.
but I don't know how long of a nap you'll be able to take.
The
We'll
products
see.
are
Maybe I'll
beautiful.
test them.
Yeah.
Yeah. They are. Well, thank you so much. This has been so fun, Izzy. We're glad to be able to chat with you a little more face to face than we have before, and of course, expose our audience to what you do, what Coyuchi does, and the difference that you're trying to make. So, thank you so much. To our audience members, of course, thank you for joining us again for another terrific episode. And if you like this one, then stay tuned and subscribe because there'll be another great one in 2 weeks. We'll see you then. Thank you.